Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says hi.
Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says creative in the house.
Welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Welcome in, guys. Settle down. Grab your
Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gang gremlins on the
Grumps says
scene.
welcome one and all.
Gang gremlins
LL
on the
Creative One
scene.
says we do fire.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it. Gang gremlins come and let's go. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gang gremlins on the scene.
Grumps says that Billy
Now
got you
tap that
higher.
screen. Now
Grumps
tap
says
that
that your
screen.
creative one hey.
Now tap that screen. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart creative.
We would be honored if you would join us.
A creative one says at Grumps here.
Gaga Grumps says who's ready to Wordle. Gaga Grumps says Rai in the house. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart Rai. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. Why?
Charlesworth says yacht.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't
Gaga Grumps
tire,
says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins define.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with Y, please.
Thanks
Rai
for the follow.
Rare says Yoka.
Grumps says at BrodyCoffer_2312 is not. And if you attempt to spoil again, you're out of here.
Gaga Grumps says Yoka you got.
Grumps says at Kara does audio start with a Y? Grumps says at Lily Phillips higher.
Says reuse.
We would be honored if you would join
Rory
us.
says beard.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Crystal in the house.
Grumps says at Kara bye.
Gaga Grumps says DV in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says reach fits. Gaga Grumps says we added a homeless A.
Says Parse.
DVP says Arena.
Air says large.
Gaga Grumps says can't be heart.
Raya Rice says great.
S says barge.
Gaga Grumps says large works.
Grumps says at MR unknown 177 stop spamming, especially a word that cannot possibly be correct, thanks.
Gaga Grumps says we added a homeless L, almost a complete anagram.
Grumps says at BrodyCoffer_2312 today's boot lands on your rear, bye. Raya Rice says alert.
Crystal says alert.
Gaga Grumps says I'm good, not necessarily kind, because sometimes good has to be harsh.
The creative one says alert.
Gaga Grumps says alert is a good shout. Gaga Grumps says barrel is too.
It's playtime.
Rory says yes.
Gaga's in the box. Don't let her lose.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those double cats in the chat.
Don't let him push you. Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly. Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Gremlins, let's go. Gremlins, let's go.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard to Gaga. Share the live, chat the chat, and shower her with roses and GGs. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next word.
Grumps says at Crystal Height, missed you sneaking in while watching the unruly bits.
Gaga Grumps says bear with me today guys, my bad eye has just decided it doesn't want to do the seeing thing today lol.
Crystal says a Grumps hi there. I saw you were busy.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says hey my dad.
You says hi.
Crystal says at Gaga and Grumps we will have fun. Grumps says at you higher.
You says at Grumps.
Secret says radio. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. R.
Grumps says I really must put audio in the banned word filter.
Secret says radio.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says never plurals in Wordle. If your word ends in S, you are likely not right.
Like a thumb, race to the top, like a thun. Tap and don't stop, like a thun. Who will be crowned like a thun? Gremlin renowned like a thun.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Secret says radio.
Grumps says at maxi 6 letters and wrong start.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat now let's see your fingers dance. Secret says go. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with R for Rai please Rai.
Rare says rich.
Gaga grumps says yep, you nearly got it, my dad.
Secret says go for Ruffy.
Gaga grumps says Rish, you got if it's valid.
Secret says radio.
You says donor.
Gaga grumps says it was and gave us a yellow R in need of a home.
Sunshine Katie says brown.
You says brown.
Crystal says polar.
The creative one says donor.
Gaga grumps says donor fits.
Grump says broom.
Gaga grumps says strangely enough the double O paid off.
DVP says broom.
Grump says at my dad dance ACC. No N.
You says pro of.
Gaga grumps says can't be croon. Gaga grumps says broom works.
Crystal says groom.
Gaga grumps says we have a roo in the middle.
Grump says outrage, liter outrage.
Gaga grumps says can't be groom.
You says proof X.
Rare says troop.
DVP says proof.
Well, creative one says troop.
Crystal says troop.
Gaga grumps says proof still works.
Sunshine Katie says groom.
The creative one says proof.
Grump says at Lindsay no B.
Well, creative one says droop.
Rare says troop.
Sunshine Katie says troop.
Crystal says troop. The creative one says troop.
The creative one says group.
Crystal says TND.
Rare says law.
Crystal says at Crystal no D.
Gaga grumps says troop is only option, all others eliminated already.
Rare says at Crystal no D.
Good game.
Gaga grumps says GG gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Good game.
Crystal says at Rare here, I saw it after I sent.
Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game.
day.
Good game.
The creative one says, look at all those oohs.
Gaga Grumps says, do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.
Grumps says at Billy Bobja, have a good day.
It's do or die, only in 3. A pretty sky.
Gaga Grumps says, if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next one. Gaga Grumps says, treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says, let's play Wordle.
Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says, what letter will the wheel choose?
Good game.
Predictions in the chat now.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says, we are starting with A, W. Gaga Grumps says, leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thumb, race to the top. Like a thun, tap and don't stop. Like a thun, who will be crowned? Like a thun, gremlin renowned. Like a thun, fingers on fire.
Gaga Grumps says, want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Hearts beat flying like a thun, gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says, I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Lights the fire, lights the fire, lights the fire.
Everybody get down! It's a freaking sniper!
Grumps says at Alex Haya.
Gaga Grumps says, Crystal with the sniping crown on Rai.
Crystal says waste.
Rai says wheat. Gaga Grumps says, your word starting with W please, Crystal. Gaga Grumps says, waste you got.
Grumps says, treasure box is open. Grumps says at D18Y0N no.
Gaga Grumps says a green arrives at number 2 Wordle Street.
Rare says Baker.
A creative one says panda.
Kyun Ella says paper.
Gaga Grumps says goodie bag up. Gaga Grumps says Baker fits.
Rai says camel.
Gaga Grumps says E moved into number 4 and is not an Kian Ella says camel. Gaga Grumps says thanks. Gaga Grumps says camel works.
Grumps says at ADC 0731 well spotted.
Rare says panel.
Gaga Grumps says L moved into number 5. All green grid so far.
Crystal says gavel.
Sunshine Katie says panel. O Creative 1 says gavel.
Gaga Grumps says panel is a good shout.
Crystal says navel. A creative one says navel.
Rare says navel.
Gaga Grumps says a homeless N lives at number 1.
Kyun Ella says navio.
Kyun Ella says navel.
Sunshine Katie says Naple.
Sunshine Katie says navel.
O Creative 1 says Noahs.
Gaga Grumps says navel is all I see.
A creative one says me too.
Benjamin is in the house.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says Katie in the house.
Welcome, Gremlin, to the game grotto.
Gaga Grumps says gold good game week Crystal.
To the game grotto. Welcome in, guys. Settle down.
A creative one says, is it still raining over there?
Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. It's your warm-up routine.
Gaga Grumps says welcome Gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat. Grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Thanks for the follow.
Grump says at Lucy Higher.
Good game.
Or Creative One says what hard.
Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game.
Grump says at MRLB we start with the letter the wheel decides.
Raise Giftrax says audio.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grump says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next word.
Now tap that screen.
The Creative One says what happened to your tap bar? Haven't seen it in a while.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gang gremlins on the scene.
The best Guna says tap that screen.
Grump says at Ill Creative One it appeared to cause the lags, so we try without.
Gaga Grump says I was told all those tickfinity bells and whistles restrict the live, so I'm only using the ones we need for the game. Gaga Grump says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grump says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grump says at Lexi-Lu23 no.
Kian Ella says that Lexi-Lu23 shut IP.
Grump says at Chris Marvin Higher there, lurker.
The best Gunner says train.
Gaga Grump says we are starting with A. T.
Crystal says Suo close.
Gaga Grump says Chris in the house. Gaga Grump says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grump says at Oliver tap up higher.
Gaga Grump says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grump says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grump says Ian in the house.
Braze Jifterax says I've just sent 180. Why am I not on it?
Gaga Grumps says Urirai with the last second jump on Kian. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with T please Rai.
Grumps says at Braze Giftac we have no control.
Rare says taser.
Gaga Grumps says we have no control over what TT counts, especially if you're using clickers.
Grumps says at Braze Giftac we have no control over who TT decides to ban.
Gaga Grumps says taser you got.
Braze Jifterax says in using my fingers.
Gaga Grumps says a green E lives at number 5 and R needs a home.
Kian Ella says Roma.
Kian Ella says green.
Crystal says repel.
Rory says wider.
Gaga Grumps says green fits. Gaga Grumps says what a tease.
Sunshine Katie says Greek. Crystal says greed.
Rare says D or K.
Well, Creative One says greed.
Braze Jifterax says greed.
Kianella says I got scammed, haha.
O Creative One says greed.
Crystal says robbed.
Mild says hey Gaga. Sunshine Katie says greed.
Grumps says yay. 50-50.
Gaga Grumps says my all's in the house.
Well, Creative One says filler for fun.
Gaga Grumps says greed for fireworks.
Grumps says green.
Kian Ella says, why did I get scammed? It was a crazy pull.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks in the chat. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Good game. Good game.
Kianella says
Good
L
game.
for me.
Grumps says it Kian and Ella who scammed you.
Braze Jifterax says do fishy.
Ken Ellis says it Grumps the game.
BLO Somvi XZ says treasure box reminder.
Gaga Grumps says Oscar in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Well, Creative One says at Ella the computer always has tricks.
Grump says that Ella scam is quite the accusation. I hope you have evidence.
Gaga Grumps says Blossom in the house.
Ella says at LL Creative One, yes, I saw Al Green and then I see the gray in.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if
We
you
would
need
be
a coin
honored
for your daily heart.
if you would join us.
Grump says it a Petruhaya.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Grump says it Man 1234 no.
BL0 some VXC says IDIDNT do today's Wordle I forgot.
Grump says it a Petru calm down.
Gaga Grumps says summer in the house. Gaga Grumps says who leveled up.
Mild says me.
Blossom VXC says at my alt he did.
Summer says at Grumps hello.
It's a LLL level up.
Gaga Grumps says then we need to do this, don't we?
Guessed it right. Now here we are, another height.
BLO Somvi XZ says at Grumps Fola.
This level's ours. Come out with me now. Green, green, look at that glow. Didn't solve Wordle solo though. Support came in, guess it snap. Level unlocked. Shout out.
Grump says it BL0 SN.VX
New Phantom level streak still alive.
Mild says in level 3 now, yeah?
Help me fry. Tomorrow we guess same time, same chat, same brilliant brains. Remember that.
Grump says it summer oh, I forgot. You cannot be mean anymore, huzzah.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Summer says at Grumps, why not?
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
We would be honored if you would join
Grump
us.
says it's summer yesterday's final game. If I got it right, you won't be mean anymore.
Praise Jifterax says irate.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Katie.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. I.
Summer says at Grumps NOO, let's say you didn't get it right.
We would be honored if you would join
Gaga
us.
Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Crystal says when you play level up for peeps, can we send level up stickers for them to celebrate while song play?
Grump says at summer let's not.
Gaga Grump says thanks for doing your daily heart secret in summer.
Grump says at Crystal of course.
Gaga Grump says yes Crystal. Gaga Grump says just make sure you let me know if anybody else actually leveled up lol.
Thanks for the follow!
Gaga Grump says want to steal the starting word? Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Grump says at Asma Arif win the race.
Gaga Grump says your word starting with I please Rai Rai.
Grump says at Summer Youth of today, no tapping ethics anymore.
Good game.
Rory says Iran.
Gaga Grump says what on earth is Iron?
Benjamin is in the house.
Milargaming says good afternoon.
Gaga Grump says I have to look that up.
Summer says at Grumps, my bad I didn't ask how you are. How are you? My else says climb.
We would be honored.
Grump
if
says
you
at
would
Asma
join
Arif
us.
it's not your turn, calm down.
Kianella says crime.
Mild says I meant slime.
Crystal says at Gaga and Grumps, yep, that is why I was asking. I didn't want you to think I leveled up. Well, celebrate.
Stain says hi all. Hope you all good. Rory says peace. Bryce Jifterak says image.
Mild says
Benjamin is in the house.
Grump says at Stain higher.
Summer says at Asma Reef you gotta get at the top of the leaderboard. To pick the first word, stop getting mad.
Gaga Grump says a fragrant oily liquid. I learn a new word.
My alt says slime.
Kianella says slime.
Stain says siege.
Mild says slime.
Book Creative One says at Grumps, have you all considered doing something else? Since taps aren't registering correctly.
Braze Jifterak says elite.
Grump says at Summer I'm drowning myself in warm Earl Grey. All is good, thanks. Yourself.
Gaga Grump says Miller in the house thanks for doing your daily heart.
Sunshine Katie says steak.
Mild says slime.
Miller Gaming says at Gaga and Grumps, how are you both?
Gaga Grumps says Elite Fits.
Sunshine Katie says stick. Summer says at Grumps tired. I want to go back to sleep, but I can't.
Gaga Grumps says I'm half blind today lol.
It's playtime!
Gaga Grumps says we end in ITU.
Don't let her lose!
Milargaming says smite.
Grumps is on the buttons!
Stain says
Don't
white.
let him push yours! Are you ready to play?
Roy
Let
says
those
white.
stickers fly!
The creative one says spite.
Ian Ella says white. Gaga Grumps says spite works.
Sunshine Katie says creep.
Kianella says spite.
LL Creative One says spite. Gaga Grumps says this game is.
Crystal says spite.
Gaga Grumps says spite is in the grid.
Alarming says spite were sweet.
Grumps says it's summer coffee. The solution is coffee, lots of it.
Milargaming says whoop.
Gaga Grumps says do the do for Gaga. Share the live chat the chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
A creative one says, you finally got one, lol.
Summer says at Grumps thinks I was literally apt to go get some.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next
Grumps
grid.
says at summer, there you go. Bring the whole pot. Grumps says at alligator hire.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Crystal says at Gaga and Grumps a lot.
Blossom VXZ says at Crystal hello.
Grumps says who said that?
Milargaming says the voice maybe needs restarting.
The LO Sam DXE says it Grumps here.
Gaga Grumps says Articfinity throwing up tons of TTS errors again.
Welcome Sophs to Wordle with Gaga.
Crystal says at BL0SM.VXZ hi how are you?
Blow some VXE says at Crystal good, what about you?
BLO some VXE says what's going on.
Gaga Grumps says restarted it will do some flashbacks.
Crystal says at BL0SS, VXZ, I'm good.
Welcome
BL
LG to
Som
Wordle with
VXC
Gaga.
says that Gaga and Grumps are okay.
Blow some VXC says at Crystal that's good.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. U. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thumb, race to the top, like a thun. Tap and don't stop, like a thun. Who will be crowned like
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Everybody get down! It's a freaking sniper!
BL0SSOMVXZ says Brew Grumps sad face.
Grumps says at BL0SM.VXZ sorry.
Gaga Grumps says ha ha ha, there was a fight between Chris Blossom and Crystal for the crown, then Grumps comes in and snipes it.
Crystal says I love it. I was using 3 fingers to and I knew it was coming.
Crystal says I'm out.
BLO Som VXC says at Grumps sigh.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with U with please Grumps.
Grumps says untie.
Crystal says, oh my God, those are the great sniper.
Benjamin is in the house!
Gaga Grumps says untie you got.
BLO Som VXZ says at Grumps untie equals unite.
Grumps says at Crystal I heard the frantic tapping all the way over here.
Bo Som VXC says troll.
Gaga Grumps says yellow tea in need of a home.
Crystal says at Grumps you probably could lol, I was on it.
Gaga Grumps says he is a troll. Good word.
BL Osam VXZ says at Haley 516 to 906 terrible word.
Gaga Grumps says we start with TR.
Grumps says at Crystal unless the screen cracked, there was room for improvement.
Milargaming says track.
Nope.
BLO Som VXC says tramp.
A creative one says track.
BLO Som VXC says at Reagan.
A creative one says track.
Gaga Grumps says can't be plural.
DLO some VXC says trade track tram.
Nope.
Gaga Grumps says tram fits.
Crystal says it grumps a mow.
Grumps says at BL0SM.VXZ no E.
BL0SSOMVXZ says that Reagan stop spamming. Gaga Grumps says it can't be plural Reagan. BL0SSOMVXZ says it grumps true.
BLOSOMVXZ says track.
Malargaming says has to be track.
Gaga Grumps says now we start track.
Crystal says track.
Gaga Grumps says track words.
A creative one says W chat.
Chosen by fate, play a part, it's a live date.
Gaga Grumps says could have had that in fireworks. Sorry whoever said it. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
A creative one says we said it at the same time.
Milargaming says Gaga and Grumps, I forgive you.
Only in three, a pretty sky.
Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next bit. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. What letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says so good I said it twice. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. T. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
La da 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 da.
Grumps says at Lily we start with AT.
Good game.
Like a thumb, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says wants to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Grumps says at Lily because that is how we play it here.
Thanks for the follow. Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grumps says at Morris _ 731 no.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says we have a new regent. Your word starting with T, please chill.
Well, creative one says trail.
Gaga Grumps says you hear chill hockey kid.
Grumps says at chill hockey kid your word with T.
Gaga Grumps says we need a 5-letter word. Gaga Grumps says treat you got. Gaga Grumps says a yellow A in need of a home. Gaga Grumps says can't be table Matty.
Well, creative one says stalk.
Gaga Grumps says audio fits.
Well, creative one says smack.
Gaga Grumps says O moved into number 5 and A is still homeless. Gaga Grumps says no T for TA book. Crystal says in case anyone wants to know about taps, if you start tapping any likes before she hits reset, tick finite.
LL Creative One says shoe.
Oh, creative one says igloo.
Gaga Grumps says needs an A creative.
Crystal says we'll delay your taps by a few seconds and then start recounting.
A creative one says Mento.
Gaga Grumps says that's what I see.
Crystal says, that is why you do not see you total on hers.
Gaga Grumps says still needs an A creative.
Grumps says as good as any guess. Let's have it.
Gaga Grumps says A moved into number 2.
Jack Wright says mango.
A creative one says Benjo.
Gaga Grumps says Jack.
A creative one says filter.
Gaga Grumps says mango is a great shout.
Jack Wright says it, Gaga and Grumps, yes.
Good game.
Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto. Welcome, Gremlins, to
Gaga
the game
Grumps says
grotto.
GG Gremlins.
Welcoming
Let's see
guys.
those W's in the chat.
Good game.
Grab your heartbeat, share us round. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. It's your warm-up routine.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says welcome Gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up to you the point of your daily heart.
Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Let's see those
Grumps
teams
says
make
that Earth
it
blonde hard hand.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Stellan Jack.
Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next room.
Gang gremlins on the scene.
Well, creative one says, and you've been in here before.
Gaga Grumps says me as always, Bolle, you've been here enough times to know I take my time, lol. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. T again.
Grumps says at Chill Hockey Kid calm down.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thumb, race to the top, like a thon, tap and don't stop, like a thon, who will be crowned like a thon, gremlin renowned like a thon, fingers on fire like a thon, gremlins don't tire like a thon, hearts beat flying like a thon, gremlins defy.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grumps says at Baby Grinch win the race to call first word.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with T please Amelia Rose.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
Gaga Grumps says table you got.
Well Creative One says half of what I actually sent ... lol.
Gaga Grumps says E lives at number 5 and A needs a new home.
Well, Creative One says at Chris Marvin it's getting a bit ridiculous.
Well, Creative One says spake.
Gaga Grumps says I did put table. Gaga Grumps says spake fits. Gaga Grumps says I moved into number 3 and S is homeless.
Stellella says chase.
Gaga Grumps says chase for fireworks.
Fireworks for Gaga. It's a performance explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks in the chat.
Three, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make her happy. As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says lol life sucks Chris. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says I demand AQ.
Gaga Grumps says demand denied.
Well, Creative One says finally.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A, D. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thumb, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grumps says it Crystal.
Gaga Grumps says sorry Amelia Crystal with the sniping crown steals the word. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with D please Crystal.
Crystal says dirty.
A creative one says Dream Crystal.
Gaga Grumps says welcome back my dad. Gaga Grumps says Green Eye lives at number 2.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says thanks my dad.
Crystal says Netch.
Grumps says that Crystal should have done the Aguilera spelling.
Gaga Grumps says it won't be plural.
Or Creative One says Piv.
Or Creative One says pinch.
Gaga Grumps says niche fits.
Grumps says that my dad dance ACC. No plurals.
Gaga Grumps says Green E moved into number 5 and C needs a home.
Crystal says Civ.
Well, Creative One says sense.
Gaga Grumps says no N.
Or Creative One says no N.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Fatty in the house. Did she bring fireworks with her?
Good game.
It says hi Gaga.
Fireworks
Crystal
from
says
Gaga.
nice.
It's a performance and
Gaga Grumps says fireworks for Fatty.
she's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks in the chat.
As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Crystal says Corgi for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Shout! It's Cooper!
Grumps says there she wiggles.
It's Cooper!
Gaga Grumps says after this message from our sponsor Cooper.
Wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? He's a corgi, don't you know? His name is Cooper, watch him go. Wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? With the wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? With the wiggle butt. Cute and fluffy puffball tail, Cooper, we do, yeah. Wiggle butt, just a little mud with a wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? With a wiggle butt.
Well, Creative One says who is Cooper?
Crystal says at LO Creative One Corgi.
Gaga Grumps says it's the name of the corgi. In some of the gifts he's in, they name him. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Oh, Creative One says okay.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. N.
Grumps says that you don't have to wait at all. Why are you here crying?
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thon, race to the top. Like a thon, tap and don't stop. Like a thon, who will be crowned? Like a thon, gremlin renowned. Like a thon, fingers on fire.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Crystal says I have to go now. Good day.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
That says rating games.
Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says have a great day, Crystal, thanks.
Grumps says at Crystal, go get them.
Crystal says at Grumps, thanks, I'm on it.
Gaga Grumps says we have a new regent, your word starting with N, please, Chuck.
Well, Creative One says night.
Grumps says at Crystal, I believe in you.
Crystal says at Stella, thank you. Gaga Grumps says Nitro, you got.
Well, Creative One says Grumps.
It's a Wordle wipeout. No letters to shout.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Chuck says Ollie.
Grumps says at All Creative One, yes.
Well, Creative One says at Grumps, did you see the nasty comment above?
Grumps says at Ill Creative One, it's been taken care of.
Gaga Grumps says same as yesterday, Chris. They were rationed. Gaga Grumps says flame fits. Gaga Grumps says E moved into number 5 and L and the need homes.
Grumps says at JADEYCAKES Reds and L.
Chuck says label.
Grumps says at JADEYCAKES needs.
Chuck says, oh, that's bad.
Gaga Grumps says can't be label.
Well, Creative One says maple.
Gaga Grumps says can't be maple. Gaga Grumps says cable works. Gaga Grumps says we honed A and L.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says no M for maple.
Miss Elanias says eagle.
Gaga Grumps says precious in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Miss Elanias says hi.
Grumps says at Kendall _ the _ wakeboarder stop spamming. Grumps says at Misk _ Ella _ Nias higher.
Gaga Grumps says and I remembered.
Well, Creative 1 says Sadel.
Miss Elanias says it Grumps high.
Gaga Grumps says eagle is a good shout.
Well, Creative 1 says filler.
Miss Elanias says ladle, only option left.
Grumps says at Harper higher.
Gaga Grumps says down to last two. Check for other options. Miss Elanias says no others I see. Gaga Grumps says me either. Gaga Grumps says let's risk it.
Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Don't let her lose! Grumps is on the buttons! Don't let him push yours! Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly!
Gaga Grumps says do the do for Gaga. Share the live, chat the chat, and shower her with roses and GGs. Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says and level up income.
Level up!
Grumps says at Miss _ Ella _ Nias.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Level up!
It's a LLL. Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says and now this.
Now here we are, another height. If support was letters, you'd spell wow. This level's ours. Come out with me now.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
We would be honored.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. A. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says it Eddie never.
User 5698 says audio.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart user. Gaga Grumps says thanks for the GG Stella. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Everybody get down! It's a freaking sniper!
Miss Galanius says Grumps loves a snipe.
Gaga Grumps says he's blocking audio and adieu not you Chris lol.
Grumps says alarm.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with a please Grumps.
Stellella says apple.
Gaga Grumps says I wouldn't blame you Chris lol.
Grumps says at Chris Marvin this runs deeper, nothing personal.
Gaga Grumps says alarm you got.
Miss Galanius says stop spamming please.
Gaga Grumps says A moved into number 3 and M needs a home.
Thanks for the follow!
Miss Galania says swamp.
Gaga Grumps says Grumps busy on the buttons today. Gaga grumps, says Swamp fits.
Oscar says at Chino ... we don't like spoilers here.
The creative one says stamp.
Miss Galania says stamp scamp.
Oscar says stamp.
Gaga grumps, says awesome guess Precious.
Blake says stamp.
Miss Galanius says at Gaga and grumps, thanks. Gaga grumps, says you know he'll pick the wrong one. LL Creative One says has to be stamp.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga grumps, says fireworks for Precious.
Explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy
Miss Galania says at LL Creative, one or scam.
Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make
Gaga grumps, says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks in the chat.
fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single
Gaga grumps, says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga grumps, says oops, I've been informed it was Creative who said it first. Fireworks for Creative.
Good game.
Gaga grumps, says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga grumps, says I did warn you my site was terrible today lol. Gaga grumps, says let's play Wordle. Gaga grumps, says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Miss Galania says you're doing great, you remembered. Precious.
Gaga grumps, says we are starting with A. R.
Miss Alania says at Chris Marvin, nice guess. A Creative One says are all right.
Grumps says at Chris Marvin.
That's right, nigga! Ding, 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 ding! That's right, nigga!
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like-a-thon, race to the top, like-a-thon, tap and don't stop, like-a-thon, who will be crowned, like-a-thon, gremlin renowned, like-a-thon, fingers on fire, like-a-thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says yay, Chris got one. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with R please, Chris.
Misk Alaneas says Grumps, send a crown quick.
Gaga Grumps says realm you got.
Oscar says cloak.
Gaga Grumps says and I've just seen the time, so last game. Gaga Grumps says cloak fits. Gaga Grumps says we added a homeless O.
Creative One says aloud.
Gaga Grumps says can't be Latin. Gaga Grumps says can't be allowed or loyal.
Miss Gelanius says a glow.
Gaga Grumps says clo that doesn't fit what's in the grid.
A creative one says
Thanks
so
for
cool.
the follow.
Gaga Grumps says can't be local.
Miss Gelanius says a glow.
Oscar says a glow is a good shout.
Blake says angel for filler.
A creative one says salon.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga grumps, says salon works.
Miss Galanias says lasso.
Says lasso.
Local Creative One says LaSalle.
Gaga grumps, says they moved into number 2.
Local Creative One says Lasso.
Gaga grumps, says lasso is a good shout.
Says 2 O's.
Bevlu says good AH out.
Good game.
Gaga grumps, says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Staletta says nice one.
Saint says good. Gaga grumps says thanks for joining me to play Wordle. I will be back at 4 PM UK tomorrow for more Wordle with Gaga.
Says at Gaga and Grumps.
LL Creative One says bye bye.
Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.